Welcome one and all to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you are having a good week. The Braves have not played an official game this week, so this has to be one of the best weeks Braves country has had in months. I say months, hear me, but it's always good to be with you. And this time around, it's a very special show. It is a three-man show. It is the second edition of the Braves Trade Deadline preview, and there's no better duo, in my opinion, to enjoy this show with than one Scott Coleman and Stephen Tolbert. Scott, it's been a while since Coleman and Coleman Law Firm have joined together. How are you, sir? Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Shawn, I'm doing really well, and this is kind of historic, this episode we're about to do, because we've been doing a podcast both here and at Battery Power and Talking Chop back in the day. We've done a lot of trade deadline talk, but really since the inception of this original podcast, I don't know if the Braves have ever really been in a selling spot. So this is uncharted territory, a lot of players, a lot of names we're going to get to tonight, but should be a fun show. And who knows, maybe the Braves will surprise us all and they'll buy somebody too in the next couple of weeks. I think at this point, all things should be on the table.
Absolutely. And we're going to cover all of that. And again, as always, it's always great to hear Scott's perspective, but right up there is Stephen Tolbert. Again, two of the best when it comes to covering the Braves. Stephen, buddy, always a pleasure to be with you. How are you, sir? Looking forward to some trade conversations with you.
Yeah, what's up, buddy? It's always good to do these. It's always good to do the three-man show. We famously did the three-man show around the trade deadline last year when we all did the emergency pod when they traded for Jorge Soler and Luke Jackson. And 12 months later, what a different vibe that we have, where we're not expecting that, quite honestly. They might buy a little something like Scott said, or they might buy a piece for next year, but like the rental piece that really tries to help them get over, get to the finish line and get, help in the playoffs. We're not expecting that. And it's just the nature of where they are. And so it's a much different conversation than we ever thought we would have, 3 months ago, but it's a needed conversation. They are sellers and they have some pieces that have some, different levels of value throughout the league that I think they need to be aggressive in at least pursuing. So it's time to have this episode. The deadline is right up, now that we're past the All-Star break, the deadline is the next big thing on the calendar. So it's time to talk about this stuff.
Absolutely. And the thing is that I'm just going to go ahead and let you know we're excited for this to be the case. This is likely going to be a lengthy episode because we're going to be thorough. We're going to be transparent because this is new territory. It's uncharted territory in the Alex Anthopoulos era where the Braves are likely going to be sellers, which they need to be. But we'll get into more of that in just a second. I do want to remind you that we have a great giveaway going on right now in our chat BCC group chat. Think you know ball? Scott Coleman, do you know ball?
I try to, but not nearly as much as you and Stephen do.
Stephen Tolbert, do you know ball?
I do not know. I don't even know how to spell ball.
If you are a listener who thinks you know ball to the level or above Scott and Stephen, you should definitely try out our trivia game and give it a shot at winning an authentic MLB jersey of your choice worth up to $400. Here's how to enter. Sign up at foulterritory.com, play trivia, crush it, and you might win. We're picking one winner from the top 10 scores at random. The deadline is July 20th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Again, if you know ball, prove it. Let's get right to it, though. Before we get into the trade deadline discussion, a few news and notes, and it is good to report. And Stephen, we'll start with you as far as we gave some opinions. I know Scott and Brad talked about it on Sunday. We talked about after the Braves had completed their draft class, kind of the strategy that they had in place in day one, early in day two, and they thankfully have seen that strategy through. Today it was reported that the Braves, after going under slot in their first three picks on day one, they were able to get under contract the two main targets that they went over slot for in day two, pitcher Briggs McKenzie, as well as outfielder pitcher, I think they drafted him to be a bat, Connor Essenberg. But the good thing is that they now got those guys under contract. I believe all 10 of their first picks under contract. It's been a successful week in applying and implementing the draft strategy, Stephen, and also seeing it through to completion. A lot of new talent coming into the Braves system and a lot of needed talent as well.
Yeah, so listen, we talked about it right after the draft that the Braves had taken these first three guys. They took three shortstops for their first three picks. They went under slot on all three of them with the idea that they were going to take some premium talent a little later in the draft and try to pay those guys over slot. And that's a great strategy, but you have to actually pull it off. You have to sign the players. And so it was obviously notable today that we got the reports that Connor Eisenberg, who was their 5th round pick, and Briggs McKenzie, who was I think their 4th round pick, the two kind of premium talents that they waited to get to try to sign over slot. They signed both of those guys today. And just for people who love the numbers, so Connor Eisenberg, he signed for $1.19 million. His slot was $436,000, so he was signed well over slot. And then Briggs McKenzie is the big one. His slot number was $588,000, and he signed for basically $3 million. And so he was the big one. He was the one they had to get away from it. You know, he was signed to go to LSU, one of the best baseball programs in the country. So, you know, these are the two guys, Connor Eisenberg and Briggs McKenzie, who the whole strategy was built around getting these guys later in the draft. They did it. They signed them, including their 1st round picks, the 2nd, 3rd, the shortstops. They signed all those guys. So, I mean, again, we're not going to spend too much time talking about the players because it's going to be years before we know how good these guys are. But in terms of draft strategy, just process, I think they did well. And I think they obviously pulled off what they were trying to pull off. And that's the first step.
Absolutely. And it was good to see, the fact that they were able to see that through. So that's the future. And it's good to see that the Braves have completed their plan with the 2025 MLB draft class. Now, Scott, the other news of the day concerns the present and the fact that, one of many topics that I'm sure will be thoroughly discussed is Chris Sale. Chris Sale, obviously, who has been out of action now, I believe, for about a month or so, with those cracked ribs, small fractures per AJ Pierzynski of foul territory. We knew that he would likely be eligible to come back at some point this year, but it was reported earlier this week during the All-Star break. I believe it may have come from Chris Sale himself. He's played catch. I think there's kind of a 4-week time frame. In 4 weeks or so, he's going to start ramping up baseball activity. He's eligible to come back on August 18th, I believe is the exact date. Point that I'm getting at is I think, number one, we're about a month away from discussions happening about when will Chris Sale once again come back. But I also think it's important to note it's likely he is coming back. I don't think if Chris Sale is going to be able to come back on August 15th or so, you're going to convince him to sit out for the rest of the season. But we've kind of now got a timeline of when Chris Sale can start returning to action potentially for the Braves in a month to 6 weeks.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see just how hard the Braves push Sale and Spencer Schwellenbach. And look, man, if they're 15 games out with 8 teams ahead of them in the wild card race, then I think you're probably right in that Sale is not going to just flat out sit for the last 6 weeks of the season. But I mean, why risk it, man? Like, dear Lord, imagine if they ramp Sale all the way back up and he picks up a serious injury. We know this guy is just incredible when he's on the mound, but he does have a long list of injuries at this point in his career. And then, Schwellenbach, man, the broken bone in his elbow. If Schwellenbach can't be back until mid-September, I mean, maybe I'm alone here, but do you guys see any reason for Spencer to just ramp all the way back up, do 4 or 5 minor league rehab appearances to make 2 starts in the majors? I mean, that just feels reckless to me. I don't know, but short of the Braves going on some unbelievable, unexpected run the next couple of weeks to put them back in this race. And frankly, when you look at the rotation, that feels like basically impossible. I mean, I guess you ramp them up and keep their arms fresh, but do not push these guys by any means.
And you hit on that point. It's going to be a lot on where the Braves are going to be. And I think that we need to address it as we transition over to talking trades. I know that people have got a bit of a break. Say the Braves come back, they play the Yankees, very tough setup for them this weekend, but say they win 2 out of 3. You want to have that excitement there. And I'm speaking for myself. You want to have that excitement. You want to have that anticipation. But Stephen, you kind of alluded to it this afternoon on Twitter. It's improbable right now to really think that that's going to be there. It's a miracle setup. Just even more thoughts on that. Not only the personnel from a personnel perspective, but also from a landscape perspective, just so many hurdles they've got to cross.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Braves are 11 games under 500. They are 10 games back of a playoff spot. And those by themselves are substantial hurdles. And listen, we call it the second half, but the season is more than halfway over. We call it the second half because it just the split of the All-Star break. But there's only like 70 games, less than 70 games left in the season. I think there's like 67 games left in the season. So you're 11 games under 500. But even more than all of that is that you have two starting pitchers. Like Bowman put out a tweet earlier of like the Braves probables for this series against the Yankees. And remember, the Braves are coming off 4 days off. And their probables for this series are Strider on Friday. And then for Saturday and Sunday, TBA, to be announced. We don't know. Yeah. We don't have a starter for those games. And like Brad has talked about this a bunch, like you can't just continue to stack Strider and Holmes back to back because then you got 3 spots of uncertainty where you're going to kill your bullpen. So it's smart to not just put Holmes immediately after Strider, but coming out of the All-Star break where everybody's as rested as you're going to get the rest of the season. And the Braves have 2 TBAs for the Yankees series. I mean, like when I saw that, I was like, man, even more than the 11 games back or 11 games under, even more than the 10 games back, like this is why I would sell, because there's just, what are the chances that this roster, even if you tell me the offense is going to pick it up, which is certainly not a guarantee, what are the chances that this pitching staff, this starting rotation is going to be in any way able to fuel some sort of miracle run? It just feels, I mean, there's a reason their playoff odds are like 3% or less. Like it's just not, it just doesn't feel like it's going to happen.
The way to buy, sell, or trade your cards is Arena Club. It is the top marketplace in the biz to get that done. And Kratz, we love the slab pack situation because rolling through a ton of cards, physically opening them, finding all kinds of commons that end up folded or in the garbage is old news. Why not get a slab pack and get a chance at a card worth thousands of dollars?
I was a common card. It's okay if you don't get me in your slab pack because you put as little as $25 for a slab pack and you could pull out something that's worth thousands of dollars. And it's a keepsake that you get to like, wait, you know what? It might be worth this much today, but I get to watch the value grow.
And right now you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul and use the code FOUL. That's 20% off your first card purchase or slab pack at arenaclub.com/foul, code FOUL.
And Scott, to that point, I think, now transitioning into actually trade conversations, let's revisit what we've heard so far. We've heard over the past couple of weeks from multiple sources that the Braves have put out there that, yes, there's going to be some obvious names that they're going to be potentially willing to part ways with. But the word adamant has been used. Like people, when you hear reporters talking about trades, you very rarely hear them talk about teams making it clear what they're not going to do. Well, they're making it clear what the Braves, at least reportedly, are not going to do is make available anyone that's controlled beyond 2025. Now, we've heard that said, and we'll get into that in a little bit in just a moment, but kind of go through that more in detail, Scott. But also, I think that it's important to understand from a Braves perspective, there's value in declaring yourself as sellers right now because there's so few of them. And I think that that's a big point that the Braves should truly embrace right now.
So I was looking at it earlier today, actually, knowing we were doing the pod. And if you look at the standings, there are 30 teams in baseball. 6 of them are virtually guaranteed to sell. Although one of them is the Rockies. They have very little to sell, even if they want to sell. They're not much. The White Sox don't have a ton, frankly, makes sense for them to move. So you could be looking at legitimately 4, 5, maybe 6 teams in total that are actively trying to sell. And sure, with 2.5 weeks before the deadline, actually 2 weeks now before the deadline, you have a couple of teams on the kind of the fringe of buying and selling, the Diamondbacks, the Royals, the Reds. The Rays. So if those teams go 10-4 over the next 2 weeks, guess what? They're buying. They're not selling. So I think what you just said, Shawn, was perfect. The Braves might be in a situation where why not? Like, why not sell? Because if you're one of 6 sellers and there's 20 some odd teams trying to buy, that is the best possible situation imaginable because you can maybe not name your price. No one's saying the Braves are going to get Mike Trout or prospect version of Mike Trout for Rafael Montero for 2 months. But it's supply and demand. It's tried and true economics 101, supply and demand. If you have 6 teams selling and 20 teams buying, you should be able to get more return. And for this Braves team that is very, very likely out of it and has, though, the idea and the intention to be competitive in 26, it might work out in the Braves' favor to be sellers and be aggressive with their selling and not kind of hem and haw over the next 2 weeks before they ultimately decide.
And I don't think there's anything to debate. The Braves are in a position where they must fully embrace when it comes to decisions, when it comes to focus. It's on the future. And it's not just about focusing on 2026 and beyond. It's also figuring out what needs to be done to change the approach to ensure for 2026 and beyond, we're not running into the same thing that we've run into for much of 24 and 25. That's
let me ask you guys a question. I want to get your opinion. So we've all heard him say, Alex, that they're not going to sell anybody that's got more than 1 year of team control. And that's been reported like 4 times. And Alex has even said it, but again, that was before Sale and Swellenbach got hurt. Do you believe that?
I think Alex wants to believe it, but I'm not sure in practice he's going to be able to hold true to that either at the deadline or come off season.
Like, doesn't it feel like you could just like semantically argue like what that means? Like they've said, we're not going to trade anybody that's got multiple years of control. Well, you could say Pierce Johnson only has 1 year of control after this year, which is not multiple years of control. Yeah. Like it just feels like, I don't know. I've listened to those reports and I've heard Alex say it. And I want to be clear, when he got really defiant in that radio interview was when he was specifically talking about Sale. Yeah. I don't think they're going to trade Chris Sale, but I have a hard time believing they're going to draw a hard line at Pierce Johnson and Aaron Bummer and be like, we're not even talking about these guys. Like that just doesn't make, I mean, maybe you guys have a different opinion. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It would be a mistake. Like that would be a short-sighted, in my opinion, limiting opinion to have. And I feel like that Alex Anthopoulos, listen, I know in the past that, he's done things after saying one thing, but, I also feel like that he's someone who, he's pretty loyal to the guys that he goes and gets. And also he seems to be someone who, once he has his mind made up, he's going to stay in place. But as creative as he's been in the past, it just does not seem to me that he's going to limit himself like that. To that point, though, there could be other reasons beyond that when it comes specifically to some relievers why he may still choose to hold on to them. But we'll get into those discussions in just a moment. Let's first start with the obvious veterans that could be on the move. We're talking about names that make sense for the Braves to potentially part ways with. Their contracts end after 2025. Their departures could lead to more playing time for players that we want to get better looks into for the future. These are just players who, for multiple reasons, it makes sense to say thank you. You've been tremendous, but now the value that could return from you being traded is probably a bit more valuable than you yourself for the future. Scott, let's get into some of those names that could make sense for the Braves to, be obvious trade candidates.
Yeah, so I think for this exercise, let's try to group this roster into small clunks just so we can break them down. So let's start with the expiring veterans, if you will. And really it's 3 players that we can come up with. It's Raisel Iglesias, who is maybe the most obvious trade target. Like, let me ask you guys just rapid fire. If you had to pick one and only one player to be weeks, I would personally say Iglesias. What about you?
Yeah, he's easy one of one. He's the most likely expiring deal, proven closer. If they're trading anybody, they're trading Iglesias.
Yeah, he's not blocking anybody, like it makes sense. There's no implication beyond this year. So Iglesias, you have Marcell Ozuna, and then you have Rafael Montero, who has pitched really well the last month and a half. So, let's talk Iglesias first, I guess. We all seem like he's the most obvious trade target. Iglesias is owed about $6 million the rest of the season, which is not nothing. One, I think, legitimate question that we've all shared on the pod is, are the Braves willing to eat some of his salary in order to improve the prospect cost? Because sometimes teams don't have much money at the deadline. Like, you'll hear, the the Kansas City Royals wanted to add, but they just didn't have ownership buy-in and they couldn't buy anybody. So they were kind of bargain bin shopping. But, Iglesias, I think he's getting moved. I think we all probably are in unison there. He's pitched so well over the last month. I think he's had 11 consecutive scoreless appearances. He basically looks like the dominant closer that he was with the Braves for multiple years since he was kind of demoted from the closer role, and ever since has just been terrific.
And I'll say this, the Braves should be volunteering to eat the rest of these salaries for Iglesias and Ozuna. Listen, they didn't spend the money they thought they were going to spend in the offseason. They got $7 million in savings because Profar popped a positive on PEDs. They always save money for the deadline that they're clearly not going to use. They've got, they were expecting to have to pay Iglesias and Ozuna for all of 2025 anyway. That's money already spent. Like, you should be offering so that you open up the trade field for every team in baseball who needs a reliever, not just ones that have money to spend. And you increase the package you get back because you're choosing to eat this. I would be very disappointed if I read a report where the Braves were adamant that they had to clear the money more than anything. Because I think that's a silly way to approach it. I would seriously hope they are aggressive in offering to pay down, if not all, at least most of the contracts for Iglesias and Ozuna to try to increase whatever package they're going to get back.
And the other thing that stands out with Iglesias is that I know that we hear about some of these relievers that could be under control, and that's why teams may look to acquire them at the deadline. But the one thing that Iglesias has that may be not out there with a lot of relievers is his track record. And we're talking about a track record of a decade plus of being an elite closer. Now, you don't really have a long track record being in the playoffs, but you have the consistency of him being able to get the job done. And even if he's not the closer, he's someone that can be an elite setup man as well. So there's a versatile arm there that could do a good job versus against right-hander and left-handed hitters. No big enough moment for him to enter in. He could be your main guy or he could be one of a committee. So I think there's versatility there. And as Scott brought up, it's just been, I don't think he's allowed to run in 6 weeks. We were talking about that last year with how good he was. So I think with the track record and again, that experience of there being no too big of a moment to where he can get the job done, I think that's going to matter for someone who truly is going after it this year. I think that the Braves, not only could trade him, but also could potentially get a relevant package back for what he could bring to a contender. He could be a difference maker in the late innings.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, Shawn. I mean, let's just say this. Of all the players we're going to talk about tonight, short of the Braves shocking us, or maybe not shocking, that's a little strong, but surprising us with a Sean Murphy trade in the next 2 weeks, or maybe even a Grant Holmes trade, which we're going to speculate on for a minute. But other than Iglesias, I don't think the return on any player they trade in the next 2 weeks is going to blow us away. They should still make that trade because you never know. Sometimes the toolsy 18-year-old turns into an impact player in a few years. But I think it's worth saying, they're not trading Sale. I mean, sure, if you want to trade Sale and your other star level players, they could restock this farm in a hurry. But I do think Iglesias, especially if they're willing to eat down some of his money, if not all of it, they could get like a legitimately good prospect for arguably the best reliever on the market, if not one of the top 5, who also, you can hand the ball to in the 9th inning and he's not going to turtle up and not know what to do.
And I think that that's another point that makes sense as well, Scott, is that when we talk about breaking these potential trade target for other teams, players the Braves could trade into segments. They're also, when you're breaking them into segments, I think that it's important to decipher that there's likely going to be different levels of returns the Braves are going to be looking to get. When you're looking to trade in Iglesias, Montero, as well as in Ozuna, part of the value in moving them is opening up opportunity for your younger players that you've already got. So I think that you're going to look to trade them more for that future, more for those long-term prospects. If you were to trade players under control, you're probably looking to get back more players who could help out immediately. So that's what makes these people, Iglesias, Montero, as well as Ozuna, a bit more sensible to move, is that you're going to be more willing to accept prospects that may be lower level prospects that will help in the future in those moves.
And the last thing I'll say on Iglesias is this. Is as much as analytics have taken over the game, one thing that I thought would have been gone by now that is still very much in play in baseball is dedicated, proven closers are still valued. Like, if you had asked me 15 years ago what position might not even be around anymore, I would have told you a dedicated, proven closer. I just assumed by now teams would have just gone to matchups and a bunch of really good relievers, and we just, whichever one we feel best about that night is who we use. That has not happened at all. Managers still love proven closers, and that's what Iglesias has going for him. If you look at the other sellers, the Twins with Duran might be the only other one where you're like, all right, this guy would be like a true weapon as a proven closer. It's not clear they're going to sell, and it's not clear they're going to trade him, but like that's a factor that matters that I wouldn't have guessed mattered, 10 years ago, but it still does. It's still a part of the game that is very much alive. And these managers love veteran proven closers, especially in the playoffs. So it should help the Braves at least get something for Raisel.
Of course, the next name to discuss, just briefly would be Rafael Montero, who the Braves got earlier this year. And, they got him when they themselves were looking to really try to kind of, even out their bullpen, bring it some stability. He was traded for a reason. Montero this year is owed $14 million. He himself is owed $2 million less than what Iglesias is making. But the Astros were willing to eat $11 million to trade him earlier this year. He came in, got off to a rough start, definitely is a risk when it comes to the walks, but much like Iglesias, he has taken on a bigger role in this bullpen, and he himself has stabilized quite a bit. I don't think that he's a high leverage reliever. I don't necessarily think that he's someone that will be even on a playoff roster potentially, but if you're looking for a middle relief option that can help get you there, if you're a team clearly vying for the playoffs, there's something to be said about acquiring an arm like Montero. Don't think the return is going to be that relevant or anything such as that, but it makes sense for the Braves to move on from him based off how they got him.
Yeah, right. And I think, of all the players we're going to say tonight, Rafael Montero almost certainly has the least amount of trade value attached to his name. But if your bullpen just absolutely sucks, like the Diamondbacks bullpen is so bad, every night they blow it, well, you know what? Rafael Montero would probably be the fourth best arm in that bullpen right now. So would the Diamondbacks be willing to give up a toolsy 18-year-old who has a big arm and some pop, even if he strikes out 40% of the time? Maybe. And if you're the Braves and you're very, very likely not going to need Rafael Montero after September 30th, do it. Save a little money. Who knows? And maybe you can use that position prospect or pitching prospect in the offseason to swing a different deal. I mean, there's really no downside of moving on from Montero and trying to capitalize on him being legitimately good now for the last month.
Yeah, I looked it up. I was surprised. Listen, I was low on Montero, and I'm fine admitting I was wrong. He's much better than I thought he would be, and he got off to a really bad start. But since coming over to Atlanta, he's got a FIP of like 3.38 and an ERA like in the mid threes. So he's been fine. And he's veteran. He's got experience. Listen, he pitched out of that Houston bullpen. Houston was in the World Series every other year. So like, dude has got just, bags and bags of experience. I mean, he's proven. So again, like Scott said, you're not going to get much. You're not going to get anything crazy, but that's a guy 100% you need to move. Like there is absolutely no reason, Montero, Iglesias, and Ozuna are the three guys. There's a reason they're in this first tier. Those are three guys that need to be traded. Unless you're getting absolutely nothing, and maybe from Ozuna's perspective, it's a little different. We're going to talk about him, but Montero and Iglesias, those guys need to be gone on August 1st.
So looking at Marcell Ozuna, the biggest name that makes the most sense for the Braves to move, obviously. We got a little bit of a hint that it seems like the Braves are starting that transition. You had multiple starts of Sean Murphy as well as Drake Baldwin in the lineup against the Cardinals. So it seems like that the Braves are kind of turning that page, ready to embrace seeing what that combo would look like in the lineup. And that's really what makes sense. With Marcell Ozuna, part of the value in potentially moving on from him is you really get a glimpse into the future. Can that Drake Baldwin, Sean Murphy combo be something you could rely on not only this year, but into the future? Of course, Ozuna still has the potential to be a difference-making bat. But, Scott, there's a couple other factors in here. many people have alluded to it. There are 10-5 rights with Ozuna being where he is in his career. That means that he does have the right to control his destination and the potential outcome of a trade. And I don't think it's any small thing because he certainly seems comfortable in Atlanta. And there's also some question marks. How effective is Ozuna going to be? Because he's not been himself the past 6 weeks. That probably has something to do with the hip injury we know that he's likely working through. So it's not a question of the fact that it makes sense for the Braves to move on from Marcell Ozuna. But I do think it's important to temper expectations because the Marcell Ozuna we saw last year and earlier this year, that's not the Marcell Ozuna we're getting right now. So while it makes sense to move him, the return may not necessarily be as great as some may think.
Yeah, I think moving Ozuna is purely just to kind of clear this logjam. And we've talked around it a lot. It makes so much sense to get Murphy and Baldwin in that lineup just about every day. And not only those two, but then it also opens up the DH spot. So if you want to have Acuna DH every now and then to take something off his knees, I mean, if this is a lost season, we don't need Ronald to play the next 9 innings of every single game for the next 2.5 months. So I would really lower expectations on Ozuna. It's a real shame that this is the year and not a year ago where he was just hitting the absolute you-know-what out of the baseball, because then they could have gotten a legitimate return. But I think this is a mixture of financial savings. Maybe, again, we keep going back to it. Maybe you get a toolsy 18-year-old and get something out of it. But for the most part, man, I mean, just make way for Baldwin, make way for Murphy, and decide if this is something that you can do every single day in 2026, or if you want to shift some other pieces around and figure out a different plan at DH.
Yeah. Listen, 10-5 rights are no joke. Like, we see players veto deals all the time. And listen, fans always think it has something to do with, like, you know, a guy hates the Dodgers or a guy hates the Yankees. It's almost always has something to do with, like, a guy just doesn't want to move his family to city X or state Y. You know, it usually has nothing to do with baseball, but guys who have earned these 10-5 rights or no trade rights, they use them all the time. And so I'm actually pretty curious. You know, the way you're supposed to do it is you're supposed to go talk to the player and say, are you okay if we pursue this? And he'll usually give you an indication. Now, we've seen some teams screw it up in the past where they go ahead and agree to a deal, and then the player's like, no, I'm good. Who was the guy, Eduardo Rodriguez, who was supposed to be traded to the Dodgers a couple of years ago from the Tigers? He was like, no, I don't want to. I don't want to play in LA. And he vetoed the deal. So, you know, that's something that has to be addressed on the back end first. If you do it correctly, you address that first. You get Marcell's opinion on it. Where are you okay? Where can we pursue? Where should we not pursue? Hopefully those conversations have already happened. But that's a real thing. I don't want people to just skate over that. A 10-5 is no joke. It's not easy to trade a guy like that. He's got full power to say no to any deal. And like Scott said, you add in the injury, you add in the fact that he's 35, he's almost 35-year-old DH who is, you know, he has not looked great, to be honest. You know, we need to manage. Now, I would love the next 2 weeks for him to come out and just hit the piss out of the ball and see if the Braves can get something for him, but I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, again, you know, there's no one thing that definitely should not go without being mentioned. Marcell Ozuna on the field has been tremendous for the Braves, especially at a time where we have not had a lot of consistent offense. He's been our most consistent offensive player, at least up until about a month ago. So he's been tremendous for the Braves, but there just comes a point in time where you realize where value is, and the value of Marcell Ozuna we probably surpassed that. Best for him, you know, to potentially find an opportunity to where he can contribute to a contender, and best for the Braves to see what they have when it comes to some other guys for the future. Speaking of that, we're going to talk about some guys who the Braves control into the future. Does it make sense now in the present to move on from them or potentially hold on to them when we're looking to contend once again in 2026 and beyond? More on that after a word from our partners. And we are back, and we have some breaking news that we'll get right into. The Braves have made a trade. That is correct. Literally minutes ago, as we're doing this podcast, the Braves for the second straight night. We told you they were going to be busy. They made a trade. The thing is, though, it's a very minor trade. Stephen, you want to give us some details on the Braves' move for the second straight night?
Yeah, so it looks like Dane Dunning of the Rangers just got traded to the Braves. I want to make sure I get all the details right. So Bear with me. So yeah, Dane Dunning from the Rangers in exchange for Jose Ruiz and cash considerations. Braves fans will care. To make room on the 40-man roster, they did drop Jesse Chavez, which they needed to drop Jesse. I mean, Jesse Chavez
We'll be
was.
back in 24 hours. That's no
I mean, they
breaking-
brought Jesse Chavez in a game they were winning a couple of days ago, and whatever. So they needed to do that. Dane Dunning, he's a veteran guy from Texas. He's been hurt a lot of the year. He's only pitched 10 innings this year. He has started in the past. He's been a reliever mostly this year. He's a multi-inning guy. He's not a hard thrower. You know, I don't even know if he's going to be on the major league roster. I guess because Chavez got optioned or DFA'd, you would assume that he's going to come up to the 26-man roster, but they could still do other stuff. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. We'll see if this is a spot starter guy. I don't know if he's stretched out to do that.
Yep.
I think he would have to be a bulk arm for at least a little bit until they built him back up. So it looks like just a bulk, bullpen guy. They may be running these bullpen games for their foreseeable future. So like they find value in these 3-inning relievers. We'll see. He's just kind of a veteran arm. There's nothing really special about him.
And
we'll see how they use him.
And Mark Bowman just reported that the expectation is that Dunning will serve in a multiple inning relief role, kind of like a long man out of the bullpen. Although, as we know, with the state of the starting rotation, he might be in line to start. I mean, they might do the Aaron Bummer thing with Dane Dunning for 3 innings and see where the game is at. So, yeah, I mean, a relatively small potatoes trade. A couple of years ago, Dane Dunning was pretty good, but he was bad the last couple of years. So, hey, it's depth. It's somebody along with like Joey Wentz. And if the Braves can find someone to eat innings for the next 2 months, then they're going to have a chance. And if they go out there and they give up 5 runs, I mean, if Dane Dunning gets hit hard in his very first appearance, wouldn't surprise anybody if he gets DFA'd that night.
But of course, Joey Wentz looked like prime Josh Hader in his first overall relief appearance a couple of days ago.
Maybe.
So hey, maybe it will turn out well. But Scott, now let's get into the fun part of the conversations. We've gone through the obvious names that the Braves should look to move. Now we're going to get into some names that I think you could easily make the case the Braves should look to move. But there's a bit more that goes into the conversation, especially when the Braves are looking to turn right around next year and contend.
So I think let's tackle the 2 relievers here, fellas. Aaron Bummer and Pierce Johnson are both under team control for 26. They're owed reasonable amounts of money. Bummer is set to make $9.5 million next season, which is probably a little bit more than what Bummer would command on the open market, but by like $1 million, maybe $2 million. I know Bummer is a bit of a love him or hate him type among the fan base. And then Pierce Johnson is just flat out good. I mean, the guy has a 2.7 ERA since the Braves traded for him almost 2 calendar years ago. He is really good against right-handed hitters, has that nasty curveball. So I think if I'm the Braves, and I'd be curious to know what you think of this, Stephen, I'm not necessarily looking to give away Bummer or Johnson. Like if a team's only offering a 26-year-old non-prospect for them, unless it's just a pure salary dump, which is probably another conversation, but if there's truly no market for these guys, I don't know if I'm necessarily looking to just give them away for nothing because you might have better luck in the offseason getting off of them. Or frankly, having like Pierce Johnson in your bullpen next year is totally fine with me. But I think is kind of the theme of the pod. If a team is willing to give up legitimate assets to acquire one of these kind of more specialty middle inning relievers, then I mean, I think all cards should be on the table and they should at least pursue any option they have.
Yeah, so I almost put these guys in 2 different camps in my brain. Like the Braves very clearly trust Pierce Johnson to be a high leverage reliever. And so paying that guy I think his option for next year is $7 million, which is dirt cheap for a high leverage reliever is extremely valuable. So like the bar to trade him should be decently high. It shouldn't be astronomically high. You should be aggressive because he's a reliever and relievers who are good and healthy don't stay that way for very long. So you should take offers, but the bar to trade him should be decently high. Bummer is someone who I have defended for years on this podcast. So have you guys. But the team clearly doesn't think of Bummer the same way we think of Bummer, or at least maybe better said, Brian Snitker doesn't think of Bummer the same way we think of him. And I don't know who the next manager of the Braves is going to be. It's probably not going to be Brian Snitker, but are they going to treat Aaron Bummer like a low leverage reliever? Because if they are, you don't want to have to pay a low leverage reliever $10 million. You just don't. Yeah. So like I could certainly understand an argument where like, all right, we just need to clear this guy's salary and whatever we get back is fine. I'm fine with that. If that's how he's going to be, if how he's been used the last 2 years is how he's going to be used going forward. Unfortunately, that's just something we're not going to know. And I don't even know if the Braves know. It's just going to depend on who the next manager is. So yes, I agree with you, Scott. It is with Pierce Johnson specifically, it is very offer dependent. Like I need a real prospect. Like I need somebody that it's going to kind of hurt you to give away. I'm not just looking for a lottery ticket. With Raisel Iglesias, I'll probably take a lottery ticket. With Pierce Johnson, 18 months of control is valuable. He's a real reliever. He's a real high leverage reliever. I need somebody off like your top 10 prospect list, or I'm just going to hold on to him for next year. And that is leverage the Braves can use in negotiation. Like, listen, I don't have to trade this guy. I can just hold on to him. So give me a decent offer, or I'll gladly just pitch Pierce Johnson out of my bullpen next year.
Yeah.
And I think that though, and I feel like to the point of, listen, if you're offered a good prospect back for either Aaron Bummer or Pierce Johnson, you look to move them, especially when it comes to potentially clearing their salary and the volatility when it comes to relievers. But I also feel like that if the Braves were to keep both of them, many would think that the trade deadline would be a disappointment because they seem like such obvious candidates. But there are realistic reasons, I feel, especially with how we know Alex Anthopoulos operates, as to why keeping them may be more of a higher outcome than some may think. For one, we know that Alex Anthopoulos is very loyal to the guys that he goes out and acquires and then looks to keep. He went out and got Joe Jimenez, Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer, extended them all. And that's something that he likes to do. So he knows the value in those guys. The second thing is we just came through an offseason where for the first time, Alex Anthopoulos was not able to spend on a bullpen to the level that he usually liked to do. He wants a good, deep, reliable bullpen, but he wasn't able to spend on it like we thought that he could. However, this bullpen has turned out to be very good. Like over the past 6 weeks, this bullpen has been a legitimate top 5 bullpen. This team does not have a lot about it right now that would make you feel it's a contender. So with how much we know Alex Anthopoulos values the bullpen, question marks about how much we may have to spend once again this offseason, and the fact that we've got these guys under control that Alex went out and acquired, I really could see Alex preferring to hold these guys. Now, it may not be the best decision if you get a legitimate offer for them, but I do think that there's more sense than some may give it in keeping these guys, especially if the Braves feel they can contribute to a contender next season.
And I think that's kind of the $1 million question is, what is the financial situation for next season? Because if money's going to be tight again, then I almost feel like getting rid of Bummer and the $9.5 million he's owed next year is like a top priority. Like calling all 29 teams and seeing who will take the most of that money. Because frankly, this team has a lot bigger issues than who is the number 2 or number 3 lefty out of the bullpen next season, when we know there's a laundry list of things that need to be addressed this winter. That's a question that unfortunately we don't know. Nobody knows. But I'm curious to see what the financial fallout is of the next few weeks, because in some ways that might give us a little glimpse into what the offseason is going to hold. Where is payroll going to go back up now that they have dodged the luxury tax? Or is it going to be flat of a payroll? Are they going to decline the payroll again, which might get Truist Park set on fire? I mean, that would be really discouraging. So that's something I think is a kind of a under the radar storyline for the next 2 weeks. But I agree with Stephen wholeheartedly. I'm not giving Pierce Johnson away for anything short of like a legitimate, hey, this kid could be in Atlanta within a year or two type of prospect. And Bummer, I'm not obviously as high on Bummer, but I'm not. I mean, he's a solid lefty reliever, and those don't just grow on trees necessarily.
Yeah, and I will remind people that, assuming they keep Dylan Lee, and we're not talking about Dylan Lee tonight because the general consensus is they're not going to trade Dylan Lee, but assuming they keep Dylan Lee and Daysbel Hernandez, who have plenty of team control. And they have Joe Jimenez coming back next year, which people forget, but he's under contract again next year. You've got young guys in the minors that are interesting. If you keep Pierce Johnson, like you're already like halfway to a pretty good bullpen. And remember, you got Iglesias' money coming off the books. I would try to get Bummer's money off the books if I'm just being honest. Just the way they use him. Now, if they're going to have a manager that uses him different, I can be swayed differently. But I try to get Bummer's money off the books, Iglesias' money off the books. You've got Lee, you've got Jimenez, you've got Hernandez, you've got some very interesting guys in AAA that might get a shot later this year to see what they can do. Like you're actually not that far away from building a decent bullpen again up next year, which I know is something people are concerned about. I'm just not as concerned about it as other people are. I would be aggressive. This is a spot I'd be aggressive, especially with limited number of sellers.
Yeah. Bullpen is number 3 priority for me this offseason. Like they have to figure out this lineup. They got to move some pieces around. They got to find a DH or whatever they got to do, find maybe a middle infielder. I mean, and then the rotation. I mean, every year this rotation somehow is about to call up my good pal Shawn Coleman to pitch for him because the whole team is hurt. I mean, they have to figure out some depth and ways to figure this thing out. And if that means going out and overspending on an arm or two, so you aren't having to dig into the bottom of the barrel seemingly every single summer, then that means that maybe you don't have a $50 million bullpen, which is what Alex has tried to run in previous years.
And Alex just showed he can build a decent bullpen on limited resources. Like he just did it. I know they already had Iglesias and Jimenez under contract, and Jimenez got hurt, which hurt them. But like he found De Los Santos for nothing. He found Rafael Montero and only cost him $3 million. Like he's shown he can do that. So again, I'm not as worried about the 2026 bullpen as other people. I think the trade deadline, because trade deadline is where teams pay for relievers because there is a postseason literally just about to happen, and everybody wants like 6 good relievers. Yeah. And so this is time to be aggressive, in my opinion.
All right, so let's have a little bit of fun here. Let's set the bar at over under 2.5, and we're going to look at the group of 4 of Raisel Iglesias, Rafael Montero, Aaron Bummer, and Pierce Johnson. Scott Coleman, of those 4, over under 2.5 of them being moved at the trade deadline.
I'm going to go under. I think 2 get moved. I think Iglesias almost certainly gets moved, and I think one of the other relievers are getting moved. If Ozuna was healthy and didn't have the no trade, I think it'd be more likely, but I'm just not sure Ozuna would pass a physical, quite honestly. And one other quick thing on Ozuna that we should at least say out loud, there might be some front offices that would have some pause about his off-field stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to pretend to be 30 general managers, but I'm guessing the PR aspect of it is not something that's totally forgotten. So that's also in there. So I'm guessing that if I had to put $1 million on it, I would say Iglesias gets traded and Aaron Bummer gets traded, even if the return for those 2 is not going to be anything that knocks our socks off.
I think Iglesias definitely gets traded. I think Montero definitely gets traded. I don't know. I can't remember if you put Montero in this group, but I think Iglesias, Montero, and Bummer get traded. I think Pierce Johnson stays.
There we go.
So maybe that's over. I don't remember who the 4 were, but I'll say over. I think those 3 guys.
The 4 relievers, but that was a sort of smooth segue into one of the sponsors of our show, and we are sponsored today by the Pick 6 app from DraftKings. All you have to do, literally all you have to do, is do exactly we just did. Pick more or less on the stats for 2 or more of your favorite players, and you're in the mix for cash prizes. Now, we're going to get to those players in just a moment, but I would be remiss if I did not ask about one of the players that we're going to talk about. He didn't get the chance to get up to bat in this situation, but I did want to get y'all's comments on what we saw in the All-Star game on Tuesday night, the home run derby to end the game. Guys, I'm going to be honest with you. That was one of my more favorite All-Star moments that I've seen in recent years. That was a lot of fun. Just real quickly, it seemed like a really positive moment for the All-Star game. What was y'all's thoughts about that moment itself? And, obviously what Kyle Schwarber did.
My favorite thing was Schwarber ended it. Schwarber did what he did. So the National League won, and we didn't have to watch Pete Alonso hit. because as a Met, I have no interest in watching Pete Alonso hit. But yes, that was fun. It's a great way to end an All-Star game. I saw some talk about ending like regular season games that way. I would really hope that's not a serious conversation. It just gets into Mickey Mouse stuff. But for an All-Star game, that's exactly how you should end. You should never go into extra innings of an All-Star game. End with a home run derby. Kyle Schwarber is a monster. We're going to have a whole conversation about Kyle Schwarber in a couple months about like a guy that Braves could desperately use.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was hilarious to me that Pete Alonso got up to, basically on deck and never got to hit, which was just.
Yeah. It would have been cool to see Matt Olson up there.
Yeah.
It was funny that everyone was like, where's Ohtani? Where's Judge? Why aren't these guys hitting? And Fox didn't say it on the broadcast, but those guys had very clearly left the stadium and were presumably flying either back home or to wherever their team was on Friday. So that was kind of funny. But it was really cool. I think I saw the TV ratings for the All-Star game were strong, which is great to see. It felt like a successful weekend for the league. And I know everybody around, not just locally, but nationally, we're saying Atlanta did a fantastic job hosting the game, hosting the draft, futures game, home run derby, all that. A lot of fun in the stadium, around the stadium. So a big tip of the cap to, I guess, the folks in Atlanta for putting on a really good show this week.
Absolutely. And the thing is that, of course, it was just fun to get up a bit of a break from the heartache that is watching Braves baseball. But the Braves and nearly every other team are going to be in action once again tomorrow night. And of course, that means if you are a lover of both the Braves or baseball and fantasy sports, you're going to get the opportunity to capitalize off that. And one of the best ways that you can do that is through the Pick Six of different options that could make sense for your Friday night festivities. The aforementioned Pete Alonso, who will be facing off against Nick Lodolo of the Cincinnati Reds, an old friend at Charlie Morton. Now, we weren't able really to talk about the Braves yet because some of their props, if you will, are not up as of yet. But this is how simple it is. Scott, I know that you are a fan of Charlie Morton. I know that you are a fan of these more or less opportunities. What are your thoughts on these picks when it comes to more than 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs for Pete Alonso and Charlie Morton struggling a little bit against the Rays, giving up 2+ runs?
Yeah, it feels dirty to root for Pete Alonso to do well, but if it means you get a nice little payout at the end of the night, then you got to do what you got to do. The NL East race is going to be a lot of fun this summer, even if the Braves are not in it. And then good friend Charlie Morton, I know somewhere Brad Rowland is cursing this podcast because I think Brad would have Chuck throwing 8 scoreless. But good time for Charlie Morton to hopefully have a good second half and then in parlay his good couple of starts here into a trade with a contender because Baltimore sure isn't going to do it. Pick Six app on DraftKings, worth checking out for sure.
And Stephen, I'll say this, even though we don't have a Braves option up, as he gets more playing time, I looked it up before we went into this podcast. The Braves facing the Yankees, they're likely going to face Carlos Rodon as well as Max Fried this weekend. Our best left-handed hitter since June 1st has been Drake Baldwin. So if you want a sneaky Braves play that could make sense this weekend, it could be Drake Baldwin. It's going to see him be really fun to go against quality competition, and he may even be able to get you some payouts as well.
Yeah, it's cool. I like that Max is, I think, going to pitch in this series against the Braves. He had some blister stuff that I think has calmed down. I thought he was going to go on the IL. It looks like he's going to be back. So, yeah, it's going to be fun to see. It's going to be good matchups. Listen, Charlie Morton's had a great year. He's 40-something years old. I would always probably bet, the over on Charlie Morton giving up more than 2 runs in a game. Tampa's got a good offense. So, yeah, love Charlie, but I would definitely take the over on 2+ runs.
Pick Six from DraftKings is the most fun way to play fantasy sports. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app now and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL for new customers to get a special sign-up offer. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick Six from DraftKings. Make sure you check it out this weekend.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. For additional terms or responsible gaming resources, see picksix.draftkings.com/promos.
Scott, I don't feel good like we just promoted Pete Alonso. We badmouthed Charlie Morton. Like, go ahead and take over the next segment. I don't feel well right now.
I know. We need to cleanse the show. Let's spend a couple minutes on Sean Murphy, fellas. This is one, if folks have been tuning into the podcast, we've talked around this quite a bit. I guess we should get our official takes on the record here. A lot of teams are interested in Sean Murphy. The catcher situation around Major League Baseball for a large, maybe not a large, but a decent chunk of teams is really bad. Teams need catchers. And Sean Murphy's really, really good. And he's hitting the ball really, really well. Maybe the best stretch that Murphy had was this past week all year long. I think a midseason trade of Murphy is going to be nearly impossible to pull off. He would also then have to go and learn an entire new pitching staff on the fly in a pennant chase. That is not easy to do. I'm sure teams like the Tampa Bay Rays, the San Diego Padres, those are teams are clearly needing catching help. But if I had to wager, if the Braves are going to move Murphy, I would almost certainly think it will be this offseason instead of in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I went on the Foul Territory show recently with AJ Przinsky and the guys, and obviously they've caught in major leagues before. So I just asked them what they thought of trading a catcher mid-season, and they pretty much all agreed. Like, you can trade a backup catcher because he's not somebody that plays every day, but trading a starting catcher, and if you think about it, like, it doesn't happen a lot. Like starting catchers don't get traded a lot mid-season. I know Wilson Contreras did get traded 1 year from the Cubs, I think to the Cardinals. I can't remember exactly how that went down. No, I don't think he got traded to the Cardinals, but I think he got traded. But it doesn't happen a lot. So, and that's why, because learning a whole new pitching staff in August leading into a playoff race is just, it's not really something that teams do. So it does seem like more of an off-season trade, but yeah, we got to, I think we got to probably put a pin in it. Listen, if the Braves trade Sean Murphy, it is a complete departure from everything Alex has said about trading these, guys who are locked up for, multiple years. Once they trade Sean Murphy, once they break that seal, it's all up for grabs. And Brad has said it, Scott said it, I've said it. Like, I think they have to re-examine drawing a hard line at these extension guys. And with Drake Baldwin, it makes all the sense in the world to at least explore. I'm not saying do it, but at least explore a Sean Murphy trade, at least in the offseason.
Forgive me, I mentioned it earlier in the show. When it comes to one thing that the Braves could help themselves out with is clearly establishing themselves as sellers when they legitimately have some of the best assets that could be out there. Because when you start looking at teams that could be sellers, take away the fact that Sean Murphy is a catcher. Just look at his potential as a bat. He's one of clearly the best bats that could be out there as a potential trade candidate. He's turned it around from where people may be questioning, is he truly an asset with his long-term control at the level dollars-wise that it is? He absolutely is. But the other thing that stands out, and to the point y'all made about him being it nearly being impossible to move from the other team's perspective, I really think that the Braves want to get a good look at just how effective this Baldwin Murphy catcher DH setup could be for the rest of this season, because that could be a really big benefit. And we know that Alex Anthopoulos has put emphasis on having multiple catchers play significant roles for Atlanta through the season. If those two can carry putting that DH spot for the Braves among the best in baseball, along with having one of the best catching situations in baseball, that could really be beneficial for this team, not only for keeping them both fresh, but also from a financial standpoint with where Sean Murphy is controlled and where Drake Baldwin is controlled. So that's another reason why, listen, if a team comes and just offers you a long-term, clear-cut, significant shortstop prospect, for instance, for Sean Murphy, maybe you listen. But other than that, I think it probably makes sense to keep him explored in the offseason. But I think there's just more than, it's hard to move a catcher. There's actual value in the Braves keeping him and seeing what they could do with that Baldwin-Murphy combo for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, you find a way to keep both of those players, because it gives you insurance in case one of your catchers gets hurt. Then you still have just an unbelievably good catcher to fill in. But I think, as we have said, and I think as folks know, if there was a way to keep Murphy and Baldwin and improve second base and improve shortstop and improve the rotation without having to touch your catcher depth, then obviously you would do it. I'm just not sure they're going to be able to do it. And it might be a really painful conversation. I would love to be on a fly on the wall in Alex's office the next couple of weeks to see not only are teams calling about Murphy, because I'm sure they are, but just what is the prospect package? Like, could you get a legitimate top 10, top 20 type of talent for Murphy, whether it's now or in November, December, or January? I would imagine, I think catcher in the eyes of front offices is probably valued significantly higher than it does like a casual fan who you just walk up to on the street. I think Murphy is someone who has more value than maybe if you surveyed 100 Braves fans than they would maybe expect.
100%. Teams, front offices, managers value catchers. I mean, they drive entire pitching staffs. And also listen, what you do at catcher and what you do at DH are inherently tied together. And so what are the Braves going to do at DH after Marcell, like post Marcell Ozuna? What is the Braves decision-making on DH? Because that affects catching, because if you got two catchers that are really good, the natural spot to put the other one is DH. Well, if they try to go sign Kyle Schwarber, then having both Murphy and Baldwin at the same time gets a lot harder, right? But if they're not going to do that, if they're going to try to rotate DH, then having both those guys makes a lot more sense. So it's tied together, and it's going to be offer dependent. Like Shawn said, if you get a massive offer, you need to do it. But I think it's almost certainly going to be off season. I can't imagine they're going to try to pull this off in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, the only GM who I could see being crazy enough is AJ Preller, and they have a supremely talented shortstop prospect. Maybe
that's a good point.
Maybe
if there's anybody that do it would be either him or God, what's the guy in Seattle? But they have a good catcher.
Oh, Dipoto.
Dipoto, yeah. They got the dumper. They got the dumper up there, so they're good.
Yeah. So again, I think we can summarize this. Don't want to give away Sean Murphy for anything less than just an absolute haul.
Yeah.
But it might be what you have to do at the end of the day for the betterment of the entire team and to give yourself the best chance to win next year. Could you use Murphy, get a middle infielder, and then go out and sign a Kyle Schwarber or trade for a good DH? I mean, the beauty of DH is it can be literally anybody.
Yeah.
You probably don't want it to be a good fielder because then you're wasting half their value. But, DH is far and away the easiest spot to address. And while a Murphy-Baldwin combination for 162 games feels like it'd be a lot of fun and be very valuable, profitable, it may not be that easy. They might have to take a little bit of a detour to get to where they ultimately want to be.
And of course, when we talk about these, not so obvious controllable players, there are a couple of other names that I think are worth mentioning, and that would be Grant Holmes as well as Aniel De Los Santos. Two names that the Braves have had Holmes for a few years. In a year where there's been a lot of disappointment, he's been one of the clear bright spots. I think De Los Santos has been a bright spot as well. I want to start by saying, no, the Braves should not just move them to move them, but you've got two versatile, controllable arms there that if a team approached the Braves with a, relevant to significant offensive prospect, could the Braves could it convince the Braves potentially move on from those guys? Sure. Again, I don't expect it, but I do think there are scenarios where if you could potentially offer an arm like Grant Holmes who could start or relieve and is under cheap control, that could be something that could make sense. We see arms like that, like the Rays just did a move like that where they traded a high, competitive balance pick. I don't expect for us to do that type of deal. Don't expect it to happen, but it could make sense.
So I want to get ahead of this before people get pissed off. We're not just talking about trading Grant Holmes because we're bored. Like, there is a logic behind trading Grant Holmes in that there are things in his profile that are a little scary. And there is absolutely an argument to be made that his value may never be higher, right? Like, he's a guy who runs a pretty high FIP and he gives up a lot of walks. He gives up a lot of homers. He has a very hittable fastball. Now, he has survived this year, not survived, like I would say thrived this year on incredible breaking stuff. Slider, his slider is one of the best pitches in baseball. But it's fair to ask, is Grant Holmes' value ever going to be higher? And when you look at the profile, there are red flags. And so if I was running the team, I don't think the Braves will, but if I was running the team, I would quietly let teams know I'm willing to listen. Now, not that I'm going to do it, but the most expensive thing to buy at the deadline is starting pitching because no one trades starting pitching. So if you have a guy who's got an ERA in the 3.7s, which is what Grant Holmes has, yes, some of the peripherals aren't great, but you could get something significant for him. And if you already think that this might be as good as he's ever going to be, and then there might be regression coming on the back end, like there's logic to it. I don't want people to just get pissed off us because we're just throwing out names. Like there is a logic to at least having the conversation, at least listening to offers. De Los Santos, I would trade in a heartbeat because he's a reliever and you can find guys like that. But Grant Holmes, I understand people are going to get mad about, but there's a reason why he's on our list.
Yeah, I mean, Holmes has a couple things working in his favor, why the Braves will not trade him. He is dirt cheap. He makes the league minimum for 2 more years beyond this, and then he wouldn't make much money in arbitration anyway. And he's a starting pitcher. And is Holmes traditional? No, he came up when he was 30 years old. But if we're kind of talking out of both sides of our mouths here, talking about the issues this team has keeping pitchers healthy and having starters available, and then you're going to voluntarily trade away one of the only bright spots you've had the last 2 years, really, since Holmes came up. So I don't think the Braves would have to be blown away by Grant Holmes, but I do think you're right, the point you made. This is probably the highest value he will ever have at a trade deadline where 80% of the league is trying to buy. And he's shown he can be a starter, he can be a middle reliever, he can be a hybrid arm. And there's just not going to be many good starting pitcher types out there. Maybe a team really likes Grant Holmes and wants to overpay. And if it means the Braves got a really nice return, even if nobody wants to see Grant Holmes leave, it might make sense. Again, getting back to the whole, this team has issues they're going to have to figure out this offseason.
And it's going to be how the team projects Grant Holmes going forward. What do they project him as? Do they project him as a long-term starter? And I know people are like, well, of course they do, but they might not. Like just because you have one season of success that's got some scary peripherals does not mean you're guaranteed for more. And the team might not see him as more than that. And if they don't, then there is logic to exploring when his value is at its absolute highest. Like you have to at least listen to what people have to say. Doesn't mean you have to do it. And you might set a really high price, but you should at least listen.
And again, the versatility of Grant Holmes, that has value. What he's shown as a starter, that has value. But again, he's 30. So the likelihood of him having the same level of for instance, AJ Smith-Shawver in terms of improvement, it's not there. And one small but significant factor as well, he right now is going through the league for the first time. This is the first time that teams are seeing him. When they start to see him that second or third time, is that same level of success going to be there? That also plays a factor into when we say this could be where his value is the highest, and it could make sense. One last fun note that I want to get both of your perspectives on as well is, Scott, you were talking about shocking, surprising, what move would constitute that type of description. I don't necessarily even know if the highest likelihood of that type of move is someone unexpectedly that the Braves could move or sell themselves. It could potentially be someone that the Braves look to buy, because with this team looking to potentially be a contender in 2026 and beyond, they absolutely could operate as a clear seller for this year, but also a buyer in the right situation, especially in a market where one of the biggest supplies is controllable relievers. What are y'all's thoughts on that? The idea, maybe even of the Braves selling some of these pieces, and then instead of taking the pieces back that they acquire, turning that around and sending them out for a asset that could help them now and into the future.
You know, it's not the craziest thing in the world. And I feel like over the years, we've seen teams at the deadline who are sellers, and they're, you see the Ken Rosenthal tweet of 2 or 3 deals where they're sending players out. And then Ken Rosenthal says, oh, and they're also acquiring this player who's legitimately good. And everyone looks around like, whoa, didn't see that coming. But it makes sense. And I think Alex Anthopoulos has been an outside the box thinker for a large, like when he signed Josh Donaldson the first week of the offseason a couple years ago, no one necessarily had Donaldson signing for $20 million that early, but similar, Chris Sale, nobody had. We did a million podcasts. I don't think Chris Sale's name ever came up. and he's traded for him, and he won a Cy Young, and he was maybe going to win another one before he got hurt. So I think Alex is very good. He's talked about he needs to know exactly what's going on with all 30 other teams, because you don't want to be in a situation where a player gets traded and you go, oh man, I didn't know that guy was available. So I don't think they're going to buy, because you're having to pay a premium that we've talked about for at least half of a season that you're likely dead. And then you, even if you have them for 26, but it would not be a total 0% chance that if the right player comes about and they're available and the deal makes sense, that they could trade for a guy with multiple years of control.
I mean, you look at the contract extensions the Braves have on the books, like it would almost have to be a shortstop, a second baseman, maybe a starter.
That's pretty much it.
Like that's like maybe I don't think you're trading for a DH. Those are just too easy to get. So like it would have to be one of those. And there are names around the league of like bad teams that have some decent players at those spots that the Braves could look to add. And, you know, as a 2026 piece, I also think it's very possible the Braves version of adding is just focusing on prospects that are close to major league ready, where, you know, the only offers they're listening to for any of these players are for players that can help them next year. I don't know. Maybe they're very happy taking 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, but they might as well be like, listen, if he's not in AAA, he's not ready to help the big league club next year, then it's not a package I'm interested in. So there's a lot of ways you can go. It would not stun me at all to see the Braves add, you know, a shortstop, a second baseman, a pitcher for next year, especially if they trade a guy like Grant Holmes, which again, we're not saying they're going to. They're probably almost certainly not going to, but they need to explore it. But yes, I would not be surprised at all. And with Alex, like Scott just said, he is the ultimate outside the box. Like Ronaldo Lopez into a starter. It came out of nowhere. Chris Sale, like this is what the guy does. He just finds the value in uncertain places. So Braves fans should be ready for anything over the next 2 weeks.
And with that being said, I do honestly think that anything is possible when Alex Anthopoulos is your general manager, but I will go on record as to making one stone cold locked prediction for the trade deadline, Scott and Stephen.
Oh, God.
We are not going to acquire Jorge Soler this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never say never. Al, that it's like the Green Goblin mask. That thing must be just ringing in Alex's ear. Just get Soler.
Jesse Chavez will be back. You know, Jesse Chavez will be back in about a week. So.
Scott, Stephen, anything else to wrap us up? This trade deadline preview edition of the Hammer Territory podcast. It's been absolutely wonderful. This says, I genuinely mean this. This is one of the highlights of the baseball season. Just being able to just sit down with people that you know are passionate Braves fan and love to cover the team and just talk. Just talk Braves and talk about what could be out there for the present and the future. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, a big thank you to everybody. This was a longer show. This might be the longest show we have ever done on at least Hammer Territory. So if you like the content, one, thank you for checking us out. And two, if you don't already, follow, subscribe, do whatever you have to do, because we will have emergency shows whenever the Braves make a trade, whether it's tomorrow or 2 minutes before the trade deadline. We'll do emergency shows. It's probably my favorite shows that we do all year long. I don't know about you guys, but we'll be here. And then, of course, you have a Yankee series right around the horizon, and baseball's back. And it might be a rough final 2.5 months. I was going to say, I don't think it could be worse than the first half of the year, but stranger things have happened, and I should probably put my foot in my mouth before I jinx something and get things real bad. Yeah.
Yeah. I could definitely, the next 2 weeks are going to be fascinating. I'm very curious what this team is going to look like on August 1st. But we'll be here to cover it one way or the other. Trades, no trades, wins, losses. This is a 12-month podcast, so we'll be here to cover it. We appreciate the support. And season second half starts back up tomorrow.
Drake Baldwin Rookie of the Year campaign starts now. Starts right now. But all kidding aside, can't thank you enough for joining us. Make sure to check out Chat BCC. Try that trivia contest where you potentially could win an authentic MLB jersey. Also, take advantage of that offer. Use promo code FOUL when it comes to using DraftKings Pick 6. You'll be able to make a little bit of money, picking what your favorite Braves could do or could not do, and among other players in baseball. For Scott Coleman, you can find him at Scott Coleman 55 on Twitter/X. You can find Stephen Tolbert at _outliers on Twitter/X. And you can find myself at StatsSAC on Twitter/X as well. Hammer territory across all forms of social media, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Make sure to check out all the great content as the trade deadline comes and goes. Until next time, listen, go Braves. Brad and Scott are going to be back with you on Sunday. Me and Steven will be back with you soon in time as well. But until then, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.